I feel left
Cheers.
out. I'm not going to lie.
There we go.
Okay. ASMR.
That is fantastic ASMR.
Thank you. I didn't know what ASMR was until last year.
That sounds like 2/3 of a Sprite commercial right there. That was crazy.
Then you burp it into the mic.
You got to do the fingernail thing too on the,
Do it, Elena.
That's right.
Ooh, that does sound nice.
And that is the start of our episode.
To our podcast. Welcome, guys.
Feels
Welcome,
appropriately on brand and weird.
Yep.
All right. I think we might have a podcast to do here today, folks. But I love that we're starting on it's story time.
Once upon a time, before I lived where I live now, I was in LA and was really in transition in my career. I had been a photographer up until that point, really traveling a ton, mostly in the philanthropic, but was ready to transition to something different. Just didn't want still imagery to be my entire world, even though I still very much love it. And so I got really thrust into the identity realm, who you are and what you look like and what you represent, specifically with music artists. And there were a couple that I worked with, but there was one that everyone would know that shall remain nameless at this point in time. And we worked with him for 18 months, give or take, in a team. There were maybe 10 of us together, some people from his crew and some people from my end in the SoCal area that we were friends with before we moved to LA. And we really cast what I call identity. So we crafted how he would be publicly perceived over a multi-album, single, and EP rollout. And that really manifested in every avenue that you saw this guy in publicly. Social media, his representation, the outfits he wore when he appeared publicly, what he wore on stage, the makeup that he had when he went to red carpet releases, and all of that manifested into music videos. And when you saw him on being interviewed in the news, like all of this, every single social media thing, every single EP revolved around this identity, this persona that we created for him. And it was intentional. I think like it looks cool to have something cohesive when you go to a social media page and it all looks similar or like related, like cousins all the way down visually. But really what we were doing was creating this like culture, this like identity that people would see and align with. And when they saw themselves represented in these visuals, whether that was the reflections that we chose for the glasses that he wore in some scenes and certain parts of what he was shown in, or in the outfits that he wore, the style that he had, and how all of that manifested in a very specific time of day, and all of the imagery was focused in certain evening hours to give you a feeling was really the goal in this, so that when you watched, when you saw covers, when you listened, all of it fell into this realm of this is what this is as an identity. This is a culture. You're buying into a feeling, an aesthetic, an alignment, because I think it transcends any of those individual components. But really what you're creating is something that people can buy into without overtly saying, buy into this. What we were focusing on was not selling a specific product to get you the newest, coolest, hippest, whatever. Instead of trying to catch a wave that is coming, we were creating a wave that was going to come. And we were creating a community around it, really is what that was. So when you bought into this identity, you were buying into the clothes, the lifestyle, the visuals, and the community.
It's not like you were going into this strategizing, how do we sell more albums? Although inevitably that is the metric. You were basically creating the community, the identity, the culture around this artist. And by doing so, once you get people bought into that, then you move into, all right, how does this translate into more record sales?
Yeah,
Is that
even
right?
like even before getting like super specific on the parts of what that actually meant, it's essentially like buying a plot of land, putting a fence around this plot of land, and then convincing everybody your whole life and what you like and desire to be is inside of these guardrails that we've put up in this field. You want to go in there, and when you go in there, you find other people, and they inform you, and the community tells you, I like these things. And because you align with it in a lot of ways, like this is, I mean, just marketing in general, but because everyone's aligning with it and wants this kind of thing, and you do too, the end result of that is I'm going to buy a product from something that is within the guardrails that I now live, that I align with, the identity that I now garner. So yes, but it's not as linear as just one kind of product, because like at least with music, what you bought inside of that wasn't just listening to streams. It was merch. It was ticket sales. It ultimately became TV shows that you watch and talk about. And now it's like very specific products that he co-signs and all these kinds of things that you see visuals of. So when you create this pasture fence that I've now said, which is a weird analogy, what you're creating is the opportunity to sell many products that just fall into this identity. The possibility and the alignment are way broader than if you just stick with one specific thing. So from an ROI perspective, it makes way more sense to do this identity thing, even if it takes more groundwork.
I mean, you guys created a category. Like we didn't know each other when all that was coming out, but I'm a fan of the artist and watched the journey, and it was category defining. And that's what we're talking about today, is like, how do we move from these weird little like transactional, like I need to get this little tiny slice of the pie done, to like thinking more broadly about how to create brands that are cult brands and category defining, like you did when you worked on that identity project for the musician.
How do you define a cult brand, and are there any brands that come to mind for you?
That's a great question.
I got a lot of them, Elena.
Me too.
One of them.
Me too. Yeah.
Cheers Me.
Yeah.
Right before the pandemic, the last thing Elena and I did in real life together was go to the YETI Film Festival. Stories from the Wild. And it is a cultural moment that they create where they put together films about people that happen to use their products. It's not cheesy product placement. It's tastefully done. And they screen these films and they bring the people who are featured in the documentaries in for Q&As. That was the very last thing me and Elena did before the pandemic hit in like late 2019, early 2020.
February of 2020.
Yeah. And they gave away these tumblers. And I think YETI is one of those cult brands that it feels synonymous with Tumblr. It feels synonymous with Cooler. It feels synonymous with the things that they create. And I think they do a really nice job of like bringing community together around their products versus like product, here's a product. It's like we create a feeling, and I'll never forget that film festival.
Yeah. That's a really good example. If you guys, like anybody, were to think about YETI now, I've never seen a standalone Cooler commercial or a standalone thing for a Tumblr. What they do instead is sell campfire scenes where these things are alongside, or back of the truck, or on an adventure scene where their products are all over the place.
Wranglers,
Yeah.
right? Wildlife photographers.
You're selling the lifestyle and the identity instead of an individual product. And by proxy, I want all their products. I love YETI.
Yeah, it's brand affinity. And another one that comes to mind, I'm going to sell myself as way more outdoorsy than I actually am, but I have 3 kids, and so we go through winter coats like nobody's business. We live in Chicago, and for me, like anytime my kids need a new winter coat, like I immediately think of Patagonia. It's something that's going to last as I pass it from the first kid all the way down to the last kid. And it doesn't even occur to me to consider another brand, just because that's another brand that I think like I aspire to live out the values that their company preaches, and it feels good to be part of a movement like that. So for me, it's like YETI, Patagonia. And my last one is, and this is going to make me sound like a real nut job, but I promise there's a reason. But it's Red Bull. So when I was in college, my then boyfriend, now husband, had 2 roommates who were Red Bull reps. And working for that company, like they had the Red Bull can-shaped fridge in their apartment, and there was like free Red Bull all the time. And they did these crazy events. And I went to school in Iowa, and they did like an ice climb on a corn silo. And they would basically like freeze that thing up, put a bunch of ice on it, and throw an event where people would come out and they would ice climb. And I think like the immersive, like the vibe that the Red Bull gives you wings. It didn't matter if you're ice climbing or you were doing Jaeger bombs in the bar. It's one of those brands that is iconic and it creates a vibe and a feeling.
Well, Amy, do you have any?
Yeah, probably much more tasteful.
No, but I was thinking specifically around identity, in particularly the theme of callings, right? What are brands that really promote a calling, in this case, maybe a profession? And two things came to mind, speaking of Iowa, which I think is funny, because I am also a former Iowa college student, John Deere. So, Abby, you're going to laugh. I distinctly remember, I mean, there is nothing like a good Iowa farmer's breakfast at these small town restaurants with like 4 slices of ham, big man farmer special for $5.99. Like, Abby knows what I'm talking about. And all these folks would be wearing like John Deere hats or John Deere gear, or there'd be some sort of John Deere something on the wall. And what, I realized, if I've been able to step back from Iowa, is that they weren't just selling tractors. I mean, what John Deere has been able to solidify is that this is the pride of farmers. We are selling farmer pride. We are feeding the world. So that really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
It's a status
good one.
symbol.
It's almost like, I mean, John Deere not as far off the cultural relevancy ledge as like Carhartt, but it's kind of like Carhartt. Same kind of vibe. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Mhm.
But Carhartt,
Mhm.
I didn't see, there wasn't a lot of Carhartt back in, early 2000s-ish.
Right.
I distinctly remember a lot of John Deere.
Yeah. Same vein for me. Like with fashion, there's a company out of New York called Amy Leon Dore. They don't ever do specific advertisements for specific stuff. They sell their lookbook is what it is. And their stores look like their lookbook. They have a Porsche parked out front. They've got a dark, deep wood mahogany interior with a cafe in it that looks borderline Art Deco and classy. It's almost like American James Bond vibes, but with a much younger, preppy undertone. And what they do is they just sell vibes and aesthetics. And I think like in this realm of identity, there's a lot of different directions you can go. But they're selling an aesthetic. You align with this and you want your world to look this way. So you buy our stuff because it fits into that already and you know it does. And we're going to show you how. A lot of clothes are kind of like that. Like Kith did that originally. They still kind of do that in New York for any fashion people who are listening to this. They kind of still do that. They're selling vibes and aesthetic now. Last summer, they did a whole campaign in Italy with Adrian Brody. And just, you want to buy into the world because it looks and feels like something that you want and don't necessarily have yet.
So why doesn't recruitment marketing work this way? Or does it?
I would
No.
say it doesn't work this way at all.
It should.
Same word.
But it should.
I think that we have maybe accidentally created a whole industry of marketing for a specific niche. We've got our own little conferences, our own tech, our own way of measuring success. And I think recruitment marketing, which set out to attract people to jobs, has become something that's very transactional and measured by click to apply, application completion rates. And it's become this hyper specific activity that we measure based on one behavioral trait, and it's missing the bigger picture of brand affinity and creating a cultural moment. And the companies that are doing it right, because I do think there's a ton of companies out there doing it right, are the ones that people are going to think of first when they're looking for a job in that category.
Yep. But like if we were to just take a step back for a little bit, and Isaiah, you've always like had some really good ways of describing this. Like, what does marketing do? Like if we had to make some comparisons and some contrasts here, how would you describe that?
Man, especially coming from the opening examples that we all gave of companies that we think are doing it well, if I had to like water it down, and this isn't like an exact thing, so take this with a grain of salt, but if I had to water it down, I think recruitment marketing as a whole is seeing a very specific thing it needs to fill and trying to fill that with the best possible applicants, which sounds a whole heck of a lot like you're trying to sell a very specific product in a very specific niche instead of selling the company. You want to work here because they do X, Y, and Z, and they provide X, Y, and Z, and then these people have benefited from the X, Y, and Z. If you point to that X, Y, and Z instead of just, we need you for this specific role in the specific thing because you have a skill set, which obviously works. That's why it's the norm. But everybody carbon copies each other in this avenue, and they all share similar rates of retention as a result. And it's not a bad thing because it works, but if you sell people on a company as a place that can be a container for who you are, you're going to get applicants and people who want to apply that are significantly richer, that desire longevity, the types of employees that you want, where you wouldn't have to do these repeat talking head videos. Again, I think that works. I'm not trying to like just come out flat against that because everybody who's listening to this will know exactly what I'm talking about. But everybody who's listening to this will also understand companies who they align with free of specific products. And if you can merge those two things together, if you can get people to buy in on the identity of a place and as it relates to the individual, you're going to have much better results. It takes more legwork and groundwork and intention in what you're doing, and you can't really just push that out immediately. But long term, you benefit way more than if you just focus on this small individual steps along the way.
Yeah, it's almost like positioning a whole calling or a whole industry and getting people behind the feeling, like the rallying cry of like nursing, or I am a CNC operator and I build the cars that America drives in. Like it's rallying around a calling and then being able to have a company that backs that calling. And so they're the first ones you think of. So they don't have to talk about necessarily themselves or the work or the minutia, but it's like celebrating and getting a vibe, around the calling itself.
And that's kind of exactly what we kept hearing. And I've just pulled a few videos of some healthcare providers talking about their origin stories, how they found their calling.
I suppose I always wanted to be somebody who wanted to help. I knew that I was going to have a career in healthcare. I think I specifically chose to be a physician due to my father being sick. It was kind of like a point in my life where I was his primary caregiver, and I had to learn. I had to learn things very quickly. I had to speak to a lot of the physicians, and because I had a degree in neuroscience and I had a more scientific background, and it kind of fell into my lap. My father's internal medicine physician actually very much inspired me to pursue medicine as a career.
How did I first know? I always knew that I wanted to help people. I always had a calling to do something good with my life. What inspired me was the death of my father super early. And it never really told me that I'd be good at practicing medicine, but I knew I would put my heart into it.
When I first decided that I wanted to be a physician, I think it really stemmed from watching my family members go through a lot of health issues and me wanting to be a part of their lives in an extremely impactful way. I think there's a saying where there's two people that you shouldn't lie to, and those are your lawyer and your doctor. And that really was inspiring to me in the sense that someone's going to put their ultimate trust in me, and I'm going to be that first person of contact to kind of help out and step in. And what I imagine my career would be extremely busy, but also extremely fulfilling. And thankfully, I get to live that out every single day. So I'm extremely grateful.
That was good. That was a good one.
Don't lie to your doctor or lawyer.
Don't lie to your
do it.
doctor or lawyer. Definitely the biggest takeaway. Trust. She was attracted initially because of trust and prestige. Yeah. She liked the concept that everyone comes in thinking that they should trust. I like that a lot, actually.
And she also acknowledged towards the end that this was going to be extremely challenging too, and knew from the get that she was signing up for that. It's kind of met those expectations, and she's still passionate about it.
Definitely something we should talk about real quick. Pointing at stuff that's really obvious in the field. That is, if you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer, you know you're going to work a lot. If you're going to do marketing that says you're going to work a lot, you're kind of stating the obvious, and in a roundabout way, it's kind of a disqualifier. Why would you point at something that is implied in something that everybody knows who's already going into that field? It's very good that she said that. I like that a lot.
There's another one. Let's pull up Liz.
Hi, my name is Liz, and I've been in medicine for around 11 or 12 years. I started off as a registered nurse right out of college, and then I became a nurse practitioner about 5 years ago, and I've always worked in pediatrics. I knew from a really young age that I wanted to go into medicine. My mom was in a terrible car accident, and we had around-the-clock nursing care. And I just watched the way the nurses cared for her, and I really wanted to be a part of that. I'm the oldest of 3 girls, and so I have been caring for my younger siblings since I can remember, so I knew I always wanted to go into pediatric setting. I knew my days were going to look really long and had to work a lot of night shifts for several years, but it was definitely worth it. I work in a primary care setting right now, and I get to watch kids grow up, and it's just the best career ever. I highly advise anyone who has that calling really young just to go for it and not be too scared about like the high demands and work schedule.
Oh, she called it. She said this is a calling. And what was also interesting is that she knew she wanted to go into medicine early because of that direct firsthand experience. She saw that care manifested supporting her mother, and she just knew, her caretaker traits with her siblings, aligned, and she's pursued this career ever since. She reminds me of a lot of other nurses.
Yeah, I think from our pulse study in this, one thing that's real interesting, and we don't need to go too in depth about this, is a little over half went into the field because of a familial reason. It was someone being taken care of in a way that they thought they deserved, and they wanted to further that, or someone who was like directly affected by a sickness and needed help with that. It makes sense, but it's very interesting.
The other thing we saw was mom or dad was a doctor or a provider. And like you can't get more identity than that.
And that's how careers were originally chosen for millennia, right? If you came from a family of blacksmiths, you were a blacksmith. You came from a family of jewelers, you were a jeweler, because the window of exposure was so much smaller versus now.
Yeah.
I should be a cheesemaker.
Wide open net.
You should.
Yes, you can.
Real interesting, but even in our modern culture, we assign prestige to something that's multi-generational, regardless of the industry. Which is really, that might be a little psychological thing we got to study, but real interesting that still has a mainstay kind of position in our culture.
The other one I want to play.
Last year, I think the best day that I've had as a physician was noticing that my patient had a stroke, a very massive stroke, very, very early on. It had happened before I saw them, but I was the one that noticed. And we got them into interventional radiology very, very quickly. And then within a few days, they had regained function. They weren't able to move the rest of their body. When I saw them a few days later, because we had gotten that done, they were talking. They were able to get up and move that side of their body again. So it was very fulfilling to have like noticed that and like been that person for that family that was very confused.
Wow.
I get emotional with this one.
Feels good to be good at your job.
This one resonates. This idea both of, being able to solve that problem, but being able to identify it before it got too late. When I think about my breast cancer diagnosis, I don't even think I told you this. Because of an earlier stage that I was in one of my breasts, they basically told me that it took veteran techs. Like I should be, I was grateful that I had these veteran techs who look at enough of, these scans to see, hey, something's off. Can't tell quite right, but we want to push this down the line. So that resonates, and I could feel that, same feeling in my care and with the techs that took care of me. Yeah. Wow.
There's two things that stuck out to me. The first is that she was solving a problem. She was solving a problem. She was able to find a solution. She says before they even, but like almost like a pre-diagnosis, like they were able to get it far in advance. But one thing that was really interesting watching this back for like the 5th or 6th time is she starts by saying I, and she ends by saying we. She starts with, I feel fulfilled because I solved this problem. But then she references the community. We were able to do the X, Y, and Z as a result of me diagnosing this thing. So she aligns with the culture and the community of where she's coming from, even though she sees herself as the spearhead of the problem solve, which is very interesting.
So I'm going to be very Abby. So what's the so what from all this?
I think a big so what, there's two for me. One is there is nothing that can be sold more to align with a person's identity than a job and a calling and what you do for most of your time on this earth. So we have this huge opportunity in employer brand and recruitment marketing to start thinking differently about how we become those affinity brands and those cult brands, because there's this huge identity opportunity. We're not talking about tumblers. I love my Tumblr, but we're talking about something that is so much bigger than that. And it's exciting because there's a lot of greenfield of where we can go with this. I think the other thing that stands out from the research for me is that you don't have to sell somebody on the virtues of being a doctor. You don't have to sell somebody on the virtues of a calling that they already understand. You have to understand what's relevant to them and what they want and what's in it for them when they're already operating at that level. And so a lot of the tactics that I see in our industry are very like bottom of the pyramid, like you got to have the realistic job preview. And those things are great foundational steps. But if somebody is already performing at the top of their function, you have to move up Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like you have to move up the pyramid and speak to something that is in it for them to reach a higher level of identity or achievement or something for their life that they don't have and they want. And for me, that's where all the like messy middle lives that we get to play in creatively.
Yeah. You don't have to sell people on something they've already bought into. It's not necessary. I mean, like, in a lot of the examples that we've been seeing with the specific study too, they buy in when they're children, when they're young, because it aligns with like a real pure morality, which I agree with, like they buy in before they even understand what that is. They're already there. So trying to sell that when it's been bought at that kind of level, it's not a good move.
I think Isaiah's already doing something differently on a project that we're working on in healthcare, which is why we're in the world of healthcare right now. But I think the way that you approach this project is very in the spirit of creating identity and creating like enterprise-wide identity for the client that we were working with.
This specific part of CVS was looking for very specific roles that they were trying to fulfill, and it had buy-in from a lot of sub companies that have a lot of different ideas and thoughts, and so it revolved a lot around trying to create an identity that jumps through 4 different hoops of 4 different companies in order to really speak and say the same thing. And we did that, and we ideated and then shot and are now finalizing the edits of this thing that we created that doesn't necessarily point to the work, even though the work is a component of it. It points to what the work provides when the work isn't happening. So we focused a lot of home life in things that happen outside of the workplace, because what we were trying to attract nurse practitioners and physician's assistants to was what was provided to them by working at this specific company, which was time. And you get time with your family, You get time at home. You don't have to bring home this stuff that removes more time when you're outside of the workplace. So we showcased these little capsules, these little moments of time where these people who work in this industry had time to themselves, to be human and to be social. There was a band setting, and there's a setting where there's a mom at her daughter's game on a field, and just sitting at home, relaxing and unwinding with your pet. Just we were encapsulating and showcasing what it could be beyond just the work itself. We were trying to sell the identity. Who you are is more than just what you work in, essentially. And we showcased that by showing the moments outside of work to really portray a whole human for people who are looking to have that in their lives.
Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting when you said that is also kind of reviewing some of the other stories of healthcare providers. Wasn't it flexible scheduling that was number one on everyone's list? Like over compensation, over leadership, over culture.
It was flexible schedule. Yeah. There was a really clear divide in a lot of the other priorities, but everyone valued a flexible schedule. Very interesting takeaway.
I think so it's really easy to see how this translates to being a doctor, right? Like or being a healthcare provider. And it's one of those careers that is virtuous innately just because you're making sick people well again and you're taking care of other humans. But I think like what's super interesting is that this can translate to any profession, and it can translate to high volume roles. And a project that I was working on this summer that is not quite out yet, it's with the high volume personal care brand. And they have stores all over the US and outside of the US. And they are really leaning into this identity of creating a good feeling, both for their consumers and for the people that work with them. And so another project this summer that I think was super cool to see this play out was experimental and leaning into, an aesthetic that the brand had never really tried out before. And Alex directed it. So we'll do an episode where he kind of unpacks it. But with this retailer, they really were leaning into the new brand mantra of a place that feels good and creating a good feeling. And it's not just in healthcare or specific to doctors. We've talked a lot about that in this conversation, but creating identity around good work and work that is meaningful to the people who are doing it can translate anywhere. You just have to find the meaning. You have to and if you don't know the meaning in the work of the company that you're working for or the jobs in your company that are more high volume, like that's where the discovery is. That's where you got to go find it because it's there. There's meaning there in every job. There's meaning in every job, and you can create identity and meaning around any job. You simply have to look for it, and some of it is more obvious and on the surface than others, but it's there. Coming soon. Patent
TBD.
pending.
Stay tuned.
JK, no patent pending.
No patent pending. Kind of. Not really. Kind of.
Trademark, copyright pending.
That's right.
From what we've seen immersing ourselves with the stories of healthcare providers, but really from this conversation, what comes next? Like what feels exciting? What do we want to act upon and experiment on as we're swimming in all of this?
I think immediate next steps as we're working on client work right now is shifting the mindset or going beyond filling requisitions and fulfilling seasonal hiring needs to like building a long-term demand for that kind of work and that kind of identity, and your company becomes the first one. I think it's like shifting the mindset from employer brand to an identity brand. I think it's job descriptions to lifestyle narratives. I think it's career site to what are the multi-channel ways, like back to Isaiah's story in the beginning. This touched every possible channel, not a website or an album. And so what are ways that we can think beyond the career site and all of the touch points that live in modern marketing? And then, this campaign mentality of like, we're pushing a campaign because we really need these people, and shifting out and growing beyond that to an always on publishing and companies becoming their own biggest publishing house of content and helpful things and identity related podcasts and stories and tips and tricks and products and whatever about an industry and about a profession. And we become our own journalists, we become our own publishers. And those are the companies that are going to be winning in the next 5 to 10 years in recruitment marketing.
Mic drop.
So that's easy.
Yeah.
Simple, right?
Just to further that, I think a stepped approach where you can still be right on the head. You can say the thing, but instead of pointing to the work, you point outside of the work, just like the CVS thing. And then you use that as a jumping off point to paint the identity of who this person is as a whole, not who they are just when they're working. And that ultimately means not just linear storytelling, not just I do this when I go here and do this when I go here and pick this up when I go here, but who they are, what values mean to them, and why this company aligns with that. And a lot of that is not just showing them in real job previews, even though that's a component. It's showing more than just this aspect. It's showing the whole, and pushing them in that direction, I think. Well, I mean, I believe.
I think one thing I've been reflecting on of this theme of finding your calling is I got to give a nod to Hollywood and the storytelling of professions. Top Gun particularly comes to mind. And there was once a little boy named Emilio Valentine who, in the middle of Circuit City, back in the day when there were really large and high speakers and big bulky television sets, saw Top Gun, and it blew his mind. He knew then he wanted to become a pilot, and at 15, he was already in the Civil Air Patrol. He knew how to fly planes before he knew to fly cars. And, unfortunately, because we're the generation of 9/11, he had to make a hard pivot. But for me, what really this conversation has crystallized was it's buying into just the story, the identity of that profession, right? He wasn't trying to fly for American Airlines. He wanted to become a pilot. An interesting tidbit on Top Gun, when that movie came out, U.S. Navy recruitment increased by 500%. So there is some real data around when you do this right and share these aspirational stories that, to your point, Isaiah, isn't just about, Maverick being a pilot. It showed everything else about his life. It was the lifestyle. It was Maverick and Goose, right? It was all of it.
Right. Beach volleyball, hanging out in social settings outside of it. Yeah.
The same thing happened with ER in the 90s, if anybody's old enough to remember. I heard an interview with Noah Wiley, who, of course, starred in ER back in the day and then has done a resurgence of this type of drama with The Pit. And he was very point blank about The Pit is a recruitment rallying cry for healthcare post-pandemic. And ER saw a spike in applications and candidates going into EMT and all of the fields that were represented in that show. And The Pit is trying to do the same thing. So I think even though The Pit, I think it's successful, and it's not just showing like the hard part too.
Yep.
And not just glazing over and making it aspirational.
Well, and I this just gets me more excited about what we do, because we get this vantage point of being creative of how we tell this story. So I'm inspired.
Very good.
And scene.